Amid fallout of the Keystone XL pipeline cancellation, people opposed to other pipeline projects across the U.S. are hoping for more action by the Biden administration. Joining us now for a look at how this could impact the energy industry is Andy Lippo, president of Lippo Oil Associates. Thank you so much for joining us, Andy. We're going to put up a map here to show other pipeline projects that are at risk and the pressure that the Biden administration is facing to either limit or modify or cancel these in some ways. My question to you, Andy, is even with the argument by opponents of pipelines that there are property rights issues and fears of a line break, is this just a way to keep the oil in the ground?
Well, I think it is. The pipelines have become the new battleground after fracking because, after all, if you don't have a pipeline, you can't move your crude oil or natural gas, and it has to stay in the ground. And as a result, we've seen over the last several years really a proliferation of litigation and delays in a number of these pipeline projects.
So one example of the slowing of this process would be the Dakota Access Pipeline. That's the pipeline that delivers oil from North Dakota to Illinois. And opponents are fighting to get the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to shut things down right now. The Standing Rock Sioux tribe had their lawyer say in an interview that, quote, this pipeline doesn't have a permit and it's operating in violation of law, and the court expects the Corps to do something about it. What would the impact on jobs and the economy be if the Army Corps of Engineers goes along with this?
Well, if the pipeline were to shut down, first of all, it carries about half of the North Dakota oil production that's currently coming out of the ground. You could expect that of that 570,000 barrels a day, which is a significant amount of U.S. oil production, half of it is going to go on the railroads, which is a much less efficient way of carrying oil rather than pipelines. You would also see that prices of crude oil up in North Dakota would decline substantially, impacting that state's economy. So I would expect that there would be several thousand jobs that are at risk for the closure of Dakota Access.
And you really hit on something there that's sort of the crux of people who are so frustrated by this whole thing, is that opponents of these pipelines say, in part, they're doing this for the environment, to fight global warming, and the Biden administration is saying the same thing. However, I spoke to the governor of Nebraska about the Keystone XL, and he pointed out that the oil is still going to move. It's either going to move by rail, it's going to move by truck, which is actually worse for the environment, or could be worse, or we're going to end up with foreign sources that have a much larger footprint on the environment.
Well, that's correct. If you look at what Canada's doing, they're actually building a large expansion to move Canadian oil sands production to Vancouver to reach the Asian markets. And world oil demand, we're connected with other sources. So if the U.S. does not receive this Canadian oil, they're going to be importing oil from other locations into the Gulf Coast as well as into California from what we might consider less stable areas of the world, such as the Middle East, where we always see geopolitical tensions rise to the surface.
And then also, let's hit on the U.S. economy here. We've got the U.S. energy economy numbers that you can take a look at here. When it comes to construction and transportation, that's 27% of the U.S. oil and gas industry, which alone employs 183,000 people. The industry as a whole is 679,000 Americans. But that's leaving out restaurants, hotels, and other businesses that are also impacted by all this.
Well, the consumer depends on affordable energy, whether that is gasoline for their cars or diesel for the trucks and railroads, or natural gas to heat your house. And the same thing can be said of all these other businesses like the restaurants. I mean, they're cooking with energy, they're buying supplies that are delivered by truck. So until the consumer is actually affected by price or brownouts or power outages, they take for granted the amount of energy that is being supplied by this industry.
Well, we will continue to watch this. Andy Lippo, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it today.
Thanks for having me.